So what I wanted to essentially have a conversation about today really was just to be able to provide some information around Australian citizenship, particularly for New Zealand citizens. And that has come about because, as I'm sure you're all very aware, there has been some announcements regarding Australian citizenship that were made in last month, when there was lots of announcements made about changes to migration. And what I wanted to do, I guess, was start to get people on the right track to be able to start to prepare their citizenship applications, give a bit of background knowledge, and then open the floor to questions for specific situations. And then there will be a little bonus at the end. So let's get started. So who am I? So I'm Rachel. I'll just put my camera on very quickly to say hello. So hi, everyone. My name's Rachel. I am an immigration lawyer. I've been practicing pretty much solely in immigration law for about 12 years. I am the founder and director of Passage Immigration Consulting, which essentially is a immigration law firm which focuses solely on immigration. I am not your average lawyer, as you can see by that picture on the screen. That is a quick snapshot of my of a recording day of me recording my YouTube channel, Diary of a Immigration Lawyer, which is also where this video will eventually end up, or this webinar, sorry. So I definitely claim to be not your average lawyer, because no one likes going to stuffy lawyers with pinstripe suits. Apologies to any lawyers in pinstripe suits on the call. So that's a little bit of background about me. So what we're going to talk about today essentially is a little bit of history, a little bit of statistics around New Zealanders in Australia, what the 1 July changes are going to be, what the requirements of citizenship are, and how to prepare yourself essentially to get ready. And then, as I mentioned, a little secret bonus at the end. So our history. So Australian New Zealanders, as we all know, we're all, sort of long lost distant cousins. We have our ongoing disagreement over pavlova and whether or not it was actually created in Australia and New Zealand. I couldn't find definitive information. So if someone does have any and would like to share it, please let me know. Russell Crowe, obviously, really depending on what stage of his life Russell Crowe is at, we claim him as Australian and New Zealanders would claim him as being from New Zealand. Look, the Australian team and the All Blacks team, I don't think I can even really comment. I'm sure my dad and my brother would have many things to say about that, but I don't think I can comment on that. Again, if anyone's got any comments on the ongoing battle between the Australians and the All Blacks, then you can feel free to let me know. And then obviously the other big thing is that in 2001, there's that magical date of the 26th of February 2001. And if you were living in Australia as a New Zealand citizen prior to that, or on that day, you did have access to Australian citizenship as an eligible New Zealand citizen. But for anyone that entered after that magical date, unfortunately, you were just sort of given this infinite permanent visa, but didn't really have access to any sort of citizenship rights. And that is what is all changing. So a few statistics. So interestingly, New Zealand citizens on a subclause 444 make up 23% of overseas migrant arrivals for Australia. They are the 4th largest migrant community in Australia, which is probably not overly surprising. I actually thought it was interesting that they were the 4th and not one of the sort of top 3. As of June 2021, when the stats were last updated, there were 559,980 citizens of New Zealand-born people that were living in Australia. Of those people, the median age is 45.2 years old, and generally the males will outnumber the females, almost 50%. So a few interesting stats there. As I said, I definitely thought we'd be in the top, the New Zealanders would be in the top 3, certainly not top 5. So there you go. So what changes are happening on 1 July 2023? Well, the big thing is essentially right now, as a subclass 444 visa holder, for the next month, you don't have access to Australian citizenship unless you obtain a different version of a permanent visa in Australia and make your pathway to Australian citizenship just like anyone else would. So it doesn't matter what passport you hold. Generally, everyone has the same rights or same ability to go down that citizenship pathway. What is going to happen on 1 July, though, is essentially they're going to remove the need for New Zealand citizens to have to jump from the 444 over to another permanent visa. And what that means is that time spent on a subclass 444 visa, which is that special category 1 that you get granted on entry into the country, you will be able to use that time towards meeting the residence requirement for Australian citizenship. Now, this is obviously a huge change, and it will open up the door for potentially those 559,000 people that we talked about earlier, to be able to jump onto Australian citizenship. And if successful, what will happen is that you will hold dual nationalities between Australia and New Zealand. So that was kind of listed on the New Zealand website relating to New Zealand citizenship. So that dual citizenship will be something that you hold. In some countries, you lose citizenship if you take on the nationality or citizenship of another country. So in this case, though, you will continue to hold both, which is great. So next, what are the Australian citizenship requirements? So now that you no longer have to meet the permanent visa requirements and go down that long visa pathway, what you will need to do is you need to meet the standard citizenship requirements that anyone else would have to meet. And so what are they? So the first one is meeting the residence requirement, which means you've been in Australia for at least 4 years. And I'll jump to these in a little bit more detail. You also need to meet a character requirement, and that's that you are of good character, you have been and you will be. You have great knowledge of Australia and you can pass the Australian citizenship test. And they're the 3 main things. So just to dig a little bit further in, so the residence requirement, so it's 4 years resident in Australia, and generally what it would be if you held a different type of permanent visa other than the subclass 444, it would be that you'd have to spend at least 12 months as a permanent resident. So at least 12 months, the last 12 months, you would need to have been on your 444. You also, out of the last 4 years that you're living in Australia on your subclass 444, you can't have spent more than 12 months outside of Australia in that 4-year period. And also in the last 12 months, you can't have spent more than 90 days outside of Australia. So that is the residence requirement. That is generally the one that people struggle to meet a little bit, particularly if they travel quite a lot. And so that is something to consider. And there is an ability to get movement records, which I will provide a little bit further down in this pack. So the character requirement. So as you can imagine, obviously, if you're taking on the nationality and citizenship of another country, you do need to show that you will uphold and obey the laws of Australia. And what that means is that, so for example, right now, subclass 444 visa holders don't need to provide a police clearance to be able to enter Australia. And so it may be the case that some of these items on this list may have been missed or not have been disclosed in the past or not have been an area of concern in the past. But moving forward, for the purposes of the Australian citizenship application, if you wish to make one, there would be a requirement to provide evidence of any criminal history or lack thereof. You would need to show that there's no association with people of concern. You would need to show any evidence or lack thereof of any domestic violence incidents. Same with any pending or past court matters, and there should be no history with the Australian government of you providing false or misleading information. Now, this is probably one of the, again, one of the other items or, excuse me, one of the requirements that some people are going to struggle a little bit with. And so it's really just like anything in immigration, it's really just telling the right story and being able to provide any evidence from third parties, so essentially people that are not you, to give evidence or outline exactly what happened if one of these things apply. It doesn't mean that your application is over or fatal if you have one of these things on there, but certainly if there is anything there, we would need to provide some special consideration to that and provide some further submissions to be able to outline those things. The last of the top 3 considerations is the citizenship test. So essentially you need to pass a citizenship test to show that you have knowledge of Australia, you understand the values of freedom, respect and equality, and you have a basic command of the English language. The test is only provided in English, and essentially it's 20 multiple choice questions. You have to answer all 5 of the Australian values questions correctly, and they won't necessarily identify which ones they are. And you also you must get a mark of at least 75% overall. So I am pleased to confirm that I did the citizenship, a basic practice test this morning, and I did get 100%. So I can continue to hold my Australian citizenship, which is very exciting. But there was some interesting questions on there specifically around values, equality, free speech, different things like this. So to just give you a little taste of what might be on the citizenship test, what I thought we could do is a pop quiz. So feel free to put your hand up or answer in the chat, and we'll see who's going to be able to get their citizenship based on these questions. So what is the Commonwealth coat of arms? A, is it the national anthem? B, a national flower? Or C, the official symbol of Australia? Do we have any takers on what that would be? Nobody knows? It's concerning, everybody. It's concerning that nobody knows. So the Commonwealth coat of arms is the official symbol of Australia. Essentially, that's the one with the emu and the kangaroo with the coat of arms in the middle. The capital of Australia. Does anyone know what the capital of Australia is? Nobody? Really? Lana, help me. Lana, I can see you typing. Canberra, nice one. B, yes, Leah and Lana. Lana, I'm concerned that there's a question mark after that. And who is Sir Donald Bradman? Is he our current Prime Minister? Is he the winner of Australia's Got Talent? Or is he a cricketer? Leah, nice work. 2 from 2, Leah, nice work. Yes, it is C. He is a cricketer. He is not winner of Australia's Got Talent, but I just thought I'd throw that one in there just in case. All right, so fun little quiz, but there is practice tests available to be able to do the citizenship test, so you can kind of, I guess, read up and get a little bit of a thought on what might be on there, and just to kind of get your head in the space of what the questions might be. So down here, what I have provided in this pack is a link to essentially the knowledge bank for this Australian citizenship test. And what it will provide is essentially like that's your study guide for when you're preparing for the citizenship test. So how can you prepare? There's 3 things that you can do, or 4 things that you can do. So first thing, if for some reason you think that your travel is not necessarily going to meet the 12 months outside of Australia or the 90 days based on the residence requirement, you can get your records. They're obviously they're not going to tell you where you went, but they are going to tell you that you essentially exited or entered through Australian immigration at a certain time. And so the movement records are available via the Department of Home Affairs. And then what you can do is sort of sit there and go through them and figure out, have you spent more than 12 months in the last 4 years outside Australia, or have you spent more than 90 days in the last 12 months outside Australia? So more than 12 months in the last 4 years, more than 90 days in the last 12 months. Sorry, getting my words mixed up. So you can get access to those if that is something that kind of is in the back of your mind that you might be a bit worried about travel-wise. The other thing that you can do, if you do have any criminal history matters that you think might come up, it's probably a good idea to do a character check. That might be one in Australia, it might be one in New Zealand, it might be one anywhere else that, you know, you might have anything that might come up. And it's then, I would probably recommend, depending on what the matter is, talking to a lawyer about how to prepare for a submission and be able to answer what's required under the character test. Not all things, as I said, not all things are going to be fatal to an application. And it is all very much about telling a story and being able to map that out properly, so that it very clearly addresses any of the character requirements that might, I guess, be challenged as a result of anything on a criminal history. The other big thing, and this has come up recently, a lot with refugee clients. And I'm not suggesting New Zealanders are refugees, but what I'm saying is it's if for some reason your identity documents are not very clear, if there's been name changes, if your birth name is different to your current name, for example, if you've had any changes by default, if for some reason your passport name is not the name that's on your birth certificate, things like this. So the identity documents is something that is really important. And the level of identity, I guess, verification on an Australian citizenship application is something that it's really high standard. And so there must be essentially historical evidence of, for example, your birth certificate. There might be then your marriage certificate and your New Zealand passport. So you can kind of see like a sequence of events to show your ongoing identity. The difficulty comes in where, for example, your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, and your passport might have completely different names on them. It does happen. And especially if people have got potentially more traditional names and then they change them to maybe a more westernized name or something like this. So that is just something to try and consider, just to make sure that you do have that continual kind of identity verification available throughout your life story, really. The other final thing that you can do to prepare is to study. So there is essentially the study guide for the Australian citizenship test that you can utilise. It's not meant to be something that's super difficult. It's not meant to trip you up and mean that you won't get your citizenship. But essentially what is really important is that you do have a look at that and it is kind of, you know, understood and you're able to comprehend that and then be able to identify, you know, the questions and things that come up as a result of the test. So, I just missed a slide, don't mind me. So do you want to be an Australian? So if you want to be an Aussie, so you've done your application and you've done your citizenship test, and then what will happen is that you will essentially get a letter from the government that says, hello, you've now been your citizenship has now been approved. So that's essentially like level 1 approval. So if we go level 1 approval is you got the piece of paper. The second level of approval though is if you must attend a citizenship ceremony. If you don't attend the Australian citizenship ceremony, you are not considered to be an Australian citizen. So it essentially is the final thing that you need to tick off to be able to get to that last phase and be able to then, you know, work towards your Australian citizen, passport and things like this. So that is something that has tripped people up in the past. I did have people a client in the past, not a New Zealander, someone from South Africa, and did all the things they needed to do, didn't realise they needed to do a citizenship ceremony and came back to Australia thinking they were an Australian some years later and realised that they didn't even have a visa anymore, and their citizenship was essentially invalid because they never attended the ceremony. So something to think about. Within your Australian citizenship application form, you will have the ability to say where you would like to do your citizenship ceremony, and generally it will be in your local government area, and that will be something that you can nominate essentially, and you can nominate with family members as well. So if you're doing applications as family, then that is something that you can do. Also, just on family applications, generally kids under 16 will be able to be included with their parents. 16, 17-year-olds and upwards, though, will need to do separate applications, and the requirements might just slightly differ depending on the age, 16, 17, and then 18 and over. So that is something to consider as well if there is a family of people that are looking to become Australian citizens. So that's all the information that I have. And the bonus that I wanted to share with everyone is that if you want to get started in the month of June, I will be offering 50% off professional fees for the month of June. Professional fees for an individual are usually $2,000. So for any individuals, it'll be $1,000. If you sign a cost agreement in the month of June, for any additional individuals, it will be $250 per additional person as well. And that all those costs are excluding GST. If you do want to go ahead on that basis, my email address is right in the corner there. And if you just email the code Citizenship with Passage, then I will be able to know that you attended the webinar, or know that someone secretly shared the code with you. And we can get started on what we can do for you. So that's all the information. So I'm going to open up to the floor for any specific questions on